folks who are. Good afternoon. I'm Carol Shires, Wisconsin Action. Welcome to our quality series. The goal of these series is to provide resources and best practice tips to help schools in the choice program to succeed. Specifically today, our goal is to encourage and equip you to utilize funding. This is the third seminar offering help with EANS, really because we see this as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for schools to tap into some federal resources designated for private schools. Before we start, just a few housekeeping reminders. Everyone should stay muted, please, during the presentation, except for our presenters, just to prevent background noise. If you have a comment or a question during the presentation, feel free to use the chat function at the bottom of your screen. My colleague, Mike Medoff, is going to be monitoring that chat and will forward questions to me. Lastly, as I mentioned, this seminar is being recorded, and so we can send it out to you or colleagues later as needed. We've got a couple more people entering here. I'm going to give it just a moment. Okay. All right, to refresh your memory, EANS stands for Emergency Assistance for Non-Public Schools. There have been 2 rounds of EANS funding, commonly known as the CRRSA EANS, which is the first round, and ARP or ARP EANS, which is the second round. This seminar is going to, you're not hearing anything. Oh, were we muted? Let's see, if you're not hearing someone, I think it sounds
tomorrow the silent auction stuff will start.
Yeah.
Sound is working, I'm not hearing audio. Okay, so to get going again, there have been 2 rounds of EANS funding, the CRRSA EANS and the ARP or ARP EANS. This seminar is going to be focusing on the CRRSA EANS. This first round of EANS funding is worth about $77 million. But private schools have only until May 13th of 2022 here, so just a couple more months to encumber is the word they're using, or use the allocation that's been given to you. So DPI would have sent you out your allocation information quite some time ago, but not everyone's used it. And that was really the motivation for us here at SCW to offer another seminar, because we're just concerned that there's a lot of money being left on the table. And we want to just bring forward to you the resources and equipment that you need to utilize that funding. Honestly, it breaks my heart to think of that funding not getting used. There's still over about $30 million that DPI tells me has not been used or encumbered for the first round of EANS funding. So as it currently stands, any of that money that's not used at the end of the grant period in 2023 will just revert back to the federal government. And we don't want that. That was designated for our non-public schools in Wisconsin, and we really want to do the best that we can to utilize that funding. So with that, let me introduce my 5 volunteers from schools that are a part of the choice program that I noticed they've done a really excellent job of utilizing the funding for their schooling. And so I've just asked if they would be willing to be a resource to you all and provide tips. So with that, Lori, would you mind starting us off with some introduction?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Lori Sacker. I'm the Chief Financial Officer at Mesmer Catholic Schools.
Hi, everyone. My name is Brian Frank. I'm the Director of Finance and IT at St. Augustine Preparatory Academy in Milwaukee.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rebecca Hanneman. I'm the Director of Student Services at St. Marcus Lutheran.
I am Paul Berger, the principal at Christ Alone Lutheran School in Thiensville, Wisconsin.
And I am Bill Druliner. I'm the Senior Director of Business Operations at Eastbrook Academy.
Excellent. Thank you so much. You know, just to make it easier maybe to recognize the folks on our panel, would you mind if you're not on the panel to just not only mute yourself, but also to eliminate the video feed, and then maybe it'll be real obvious for folks when people are answering questions. That might be helpful. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, well, as you know, when we had you sign up for this meeting, we had a survey along with that. And according to our brief survey, here's what we found were common concerns about utilizing EANS. The top four. The first one, the title program is a nightmare for us. I'm afraid that this might be something similar. The second one was you feel that the process is too difficult to understand. The third concern is that you can't figure out what category to use for your various expenses. And four, similar, you're confused, but specifically over when to use the future reimbursement model and when to use the direct service model. So those were the top concerns, a lot of them kind of around that confusion piece. So that's really where we're hoping that this can be helpful today, to just have your peers answer those questions and give you some helpful tips. So I thought maybe first we could start. Lori, would you mind addressing that concern about the difference between your experience with the title program and accessing those services versus your experience with EANS?
Sure. Our experience with the title funds and then with the ESSER and GEAR funds was, to be blunt, kind of a nightmare. Everything that we tried to use it for had so many roadblocks and so many rules and so many strings attached to it. It was difficult, and we still have funds that are going unused. So naturally, as we went to start using the EANS funds, I was skeptical about that as well. But we kind of took the bulls by the horns and started asking a lot of questions in the beginning of CRRSA 6, and CRRSA 6 was tremendously helpful. And as DPI built out the spreadsheet that lists the items and the categories, I would readily email a list of like 10 things to CRRSA 6. And then we would typically set up a meeting and have a 15-minute or a 30-minute meeting and talk over all of the items that we were interested in purchasing for use with our students, or we also are using a lot of the funds to have staff positions paid for on our behalf. And Jason Levitch and I would just talk through them all, and he would tell me what category, he would tell me if it was reimbursable or not. And you do have a choice. If it is reimbursable, you can still purchase it as a direct service, and then you don't have to go through the reimbursement process later if you don't wish to. So it was tremendously easy compared to the title funds. So I would not let your prior experiences with title funds and ESSER or GEAR funds cloud your judgment about EANS funds, because it is a huge, huge difference. It's been extremely easy to navigate compared to title.
Excellent. Okay, I'm wondering, I think I might share my screen again here and just show a couple tools, and so that make sure that we're all on the same page about what's available. So I'm going to first share my screen again and have the CRRSA 6 website up here for you. This is where you go for your EANS, and you'll see catalog of services here, events and learning. That's great. You can click on that and see past seminars, which are super helpful, that CRRSA 6 has put together along with DPI. And then here is the claims and reimbursements area. So this is the request just to get your eyes on that. And then while I'm sharing my screen here, I think I'll show you also on the DPI EANS site, and I'll go to that. That looks like this, emergency assistance for non-public schools. And if you go way down to the bottom, you'll see these various categories. And I think this is going to come up in our conversation a lot today in terms of which category you're using. And way down at the bottom, you're going to see this detailed allowable expenses spreadsheet. And that looks like this. And this can be a really helpful tool. I'm going to move this out of the way here for you to see the categories. And so on the left side there, they're numbered. Category 1, Category 3, Category 6, etc. So when we're referencing these today in our discussion, that's what we're talking about. Okay, so let's
Do you mind if, can I just add on to Lori's comments about the difference between title and EANS? One of the important pieces, I think, is the streamlined. You do not need to work through a vendor in order to get the title vendor, in order to get approval. You work directly with, CRRSA 6 to get the approval. So the timeline goes faster. And you have a freedom of, contracting with any vendor or purchasing from any vendor, where ESSER and GEARS has limited vendors, considering they have to work with the processing time of either LEX or Catapult, who's, streamlining it. So those were two of the things that I think were the kind of what Lori was saying. The ease of it was the freedom of finding your own vendors, and then the timeline of working directly with the CRRSA, not through MPS approval process.
Excellent. Okay, so along those lines, Rebecca, so you mentioned the vendors and the CRRSAs. So when you're doing direct service, that model, you need to somehow connect with a vendor to do this. So kind of walk people through that process. Like, what if they have vendors that they already like that they want to stick with?
So then you would work directly with your vendor in order to get a quote for the either services or products that you are interested in using EANS for. Have them create the quote, and that's where you're going to upload it to the direct request form on what you just shared out. So it's just about making sure they give you the quote in order to give to EANS to process.
Okay, and I noticed that there's a question in the chat that the last update from DPI is October. Will there be another one soon? I'd first recommend that you would look at the CRRSA 6 website that I showed just a moment ago. They've got a variety of trainings on that you can reference. And I can also circle back with you individually later, Catherine, with some more updates. Someone mentioned staff. Let's talk about that a minute. Bill, I believe you've been able to utilize EANS for some staffing. That's intriguing. How did you do that?
Yeah, we have. So in our CRRSA EANS bucket of money, we identified that we wanted to add a part-time math interventionist, essentially like an in-house tutor to our staff. And we also wanted to add a licensed counselor to our team. We had in both cases a candidate, an identified person that we wanted to bring on board, and both were interested in doing this part-time, which was a good fit, I think, all around for us. One wanted to set up the structure as an independent contractor, kind of working through her own LLC, and the other was interested in just being employed part-time on an hourly basis. So what we did was we took a proposal from the counselor that she had given to us about the services that she offered and her credentials and all of that, uploaded that PDF to the direct service request process through CRRSA 6, explained why we wanted this person and that it connected to one of the allowable 12 categories. And then they very promptly let us know that that was an allowable use. They approved that. And then they created a purchase order, which was sent to her. And so she's been sending her monthly invoices to CRRSA for payment from them. She had actually previously done some work for us under title, and she was like, Bill, this is like so much easier. Okay. And so it's really been very seamless to have the counselor. On the part-time employee, we did the same thing. We essentially had her resume and we explained why we wanted to bring this person on board to help close kind of learning gaps that had emerged during the pandemic. They had us fill out a staffing form online. They then reached out directly to Dottie and gave her the information about, employment at CRRSA 6. She fills out a timesheet every 2 weeks that's approved by her kind of on-site supervisor here at EPA. And then that is all direct deposited to her. So it's essentially like, this part-time employee just still has the same reporting relationships within the building. Everything is essentially the same as if she was employed by us. The only difference is that her payroll is run through CRRSA 6. And we never even occurred to us to try to work with our local CRRSA on this. We just were, everything was very easy to work with CRRSA 6 on this. And so everything, that's a question that I think came up in our prep call was, can you work with CRRSA 6 for employing people? The answer is yes. So, yeah.
Lori, do you want to add anything to that? I know you guys have had a lot of luck with staff.
We have had a lot of luck with staff. We've got math interventionists, we've got extra educational assistants. We've got just a number of extra teachers at our high school to reduce class sizes so people can get more attention and support to work their way through learning loss, especially in the core classes of math and English, social studies. And we went out and found the people to hire. We were able to pay them as any of the same amount that our employees would be paid based on our salary scale. And then we just take them to CRRSA 6. We've used CRRSA 6 as our contractor for this. You can go through any of the CRRSAs really, or the CRRSA, our schools in the Milwaukee area are located in CRRSA 1. We chose to go through CRRSA 6. We took them, the candidates, and they do all the paperwork, all the hiring, all the benefits administration, all the HR function is done with CRRSA 6. But these people are working in our school just as if they're one of us. So it's been very beneficial for our students.
Okay, so Lori, a question came through here, a couple follow-up questions on the staffing. One is, I think you might have mentioned this, the pay rate for these staff that are hired through CRRSA 6. Did you at your school determine that, or did they determine that?
We did determine that because we wanted to pay them the same thing that the other teachers in our school or the other interventionists would be being paid. And yes, I saw a question flash up on there. CRRSA does charge a 5% administration fee for this, but they charge a fee for all of their things.
One thing that's worth clarifying
it's far
too.
less than the 12% that title charges. And it's well worth it to us because it has been seamless.
You also are allowed to have your own hiring criteria, right? So if your school only requires a teacher to have a bachelor's degree instead of being a certified teacher or things like that, that is allowable. They will follow whatever rules you have for employment of aides or things like that as well.
That is correct.
Here in terms of, there's a couple questions regarding these being limited term. So what happens with these staff when the EANS funding runs out in a couple of years?
We at Messmer are planning for that. We know they're limited term, but we also know that our students need the extra support. We're not going to pass up the opportunity in these, 2-3 years to provide that to our students, but we are carefully planning and knowing that we will not be able to have all of these positions when this money runs out. It's a tough situation to be in, but we do know that we would rather have them have the support now versus not. So that is the decision that we have made as a school to do that. But it is up to each individual school to decide how they're going to work it out for themselves.
And one of the questions was whether you thought it'd be possible to transition an existing employee to CISA 6. And I'm assuming the answer to that would be yes, based on what you said, Bill, that you just would reach out to CISA 6 and let them know that you had an interest in this particular employee, give them the resume and so forth. Is that right?
That's right. I can tell you, we have had people that had been employed at EBA that have now moved their employment to CISA 6. So, yep.
Okay, and when you're doing that, let's talk categories for a minute. What category does that fit under?
12.
Under 12? Okay. We're gonna, a couple of these questions, let's see, one of them, the Secretary of Education Cardona encouraged using federal dollars to provide faculty with retention bonuses. Are we able to do that? And how is the approval process handled for that? Do any of you know the answer to that?
I'm pretty sure that would be an eligible expense, right? So if you were to say, here is a roster of employees, here is the stipend amount. This is what we did for summer school last year, right? We provided them with a roster of employees and the amount they were going to be paid, right? And it was approved pretty easily without a lot of hassle. So I think if you were to do I haven't tried that as an allowable expense that we submitted at our school, but I think it would probably fit the requirements.
So just to clarify, that would be under as a future reimbursement, I take it? That be handled.
So that's a great question. All staff related things must be paid between CISA to the employee. You are never going to get reimbursed a dime for money you've paid to a staff member. That's always required to be direct service.
So that's going to be something that you'd really need to discuss with Jason, probably at CISA 6. That would be a recommendation. And just to reiterate again, I know each one of you on our panel has said how incredibly easy it has been for you to work with CISA 6. And they've just been really super helpful and available in the process. Let's pivot a little bit here to some other things besides staff. Paul, I'm curious about your experience because you're from a very small school. And so give us some ideas. First of all, what have you spent your EANS funding on? And as kind of a one-man gang here, having to do all this work yourself, give us a little bit of insight there, how you've managed it.
Yeah, so last year we were 95 students, 3K to grade 8. But we've grown 17 since then, so we're getting bigger. But yeah, so it's been really not that much work. I mean, you have to do bookkeeping things, but I used to deal with title, back when I worked in Milwaukee, and like people have said, this is nothing like that. We had aging smart boards. They were dying like every week. We were able to replace all of our smart boards with new line flat panels. So we got 9 of those, one for each of our learning spaces. We were able to upgrade our wireless access points. They were like 3 or 4 years old, but already obsolete. Switches, we were upgrading our switches to gigabit switches from previous generation. We were able to get 25 Chromebooks. We have some that are going out of life already. And air purifiers. We were able to afford that, give some families some reassurance that we were doing more to mitigate COVID in our classrooms. So our little school, was able to invest $47,000 in the school, things that we couldn't have afforded otherwise. So I know some people look at their budget and try to cover things from their budget. We were looking at things that we couldn't cover in our budget. So
excellent.
Yeah,
So I'm going to pivot over to Brian. I know you had some comments when we were speaking earlier about where's the starting point for schools. What would you recommend?
Yeah, I think when it comes to the starting point, when you get an allocation like this, there's sort of two lines of thought, right? Do we want to look for something that's in our budget, or like Paul was just saying, is there some project that we've really been wanting to do that we couldn't fit into our budget and this could work for that? At our school, we tried to do more of the, let's stick to things that we have budgeted. So we took our budget and we sort of compared it against that Excel spreadsheet that you showed earlier with the eligible expenses, and pretty much just tried to find anything that we could that matched up between the two. And there's a lot of them that, in like the title world would be unthinkable, right? Things like Chromebooks or curriculum, things like that, that are allowable through the EANS program. So that was sort of our first step, was taking our budget, comparing it against that Excel spreadsheet. From there was a lot of conversations with EANS, whether that's through email or I guess I should say with CRRSA 6. There was emails. There's a way to schedule like a 15-minute appointment with Jason from CRRSA 6. And really just kind of talking back and forth on, which category would this fall into, which reimbursement style works best for this. Should we do a future reimbursement, or can we do direct service on something like this? Because something that was, was hard for me to understand initially was that direct service, the title kind of like the name of that makes it seem like you can't get any goods, right? It's just a service being performed. But direct service, you can still get goods as well. You just send in your bid or your quote, like Rebecca was talking about. And so that was sort of our first steps, and it's been pretty effective so far in trying to eliminate things from our budget that we would have otherwise purchased and use EANS funding instead.
So one of the things I would highlight that I heard you say, and I was encouraged by this, is that for those schools that are feeling like they're still pretty confused about all those categories, and they look at their budget and they just don't know where all this is going to fit in, and one of the questions here is out of the box thinking and so forth. Well, one of the things I heard you say was that if you make an appointment, one of these little 15-minute appointments with CRRSA 6, it'll probably be with Jason Levosh, that he's super helpful through that process of saying, oh, okay, maybe category 3 for this and category 4 for that. Is that correct?
Yep, definitely. And a lot of the times, like I had a meeting with him a week ago, and I had 4 things on a list, and all 4 of them I was like, I don't really know about this. And all 4 of them, he was like, yep, absolutely. You can do that with this category or this category. One of them was we wanted to hire someone to help with enrollment at the school because with all of the restrictions, it's harder to get in contact with families. We can't have them coming into the school. So we wanted to bring on another person. And so we hired a full-time staff member to help with enrollment through the EANS program, which, I mean, it's kind of hard to put those together, right? COVID and enrollment, but we were able to figure out a way to do that. So that was sort of an out of the box one that I just sort of floated it by them and was like, hey, what do you think of this one? And they liked it. I emailed them earlier today about, we're thinking about replacing some ceilings in classrooms to try to have better air purification and dust control and things like that. They replied back within an hour and said, we're not quite sure about this one, but we meet with DPI once a week. We'll ask them and we'll get back to you by tomorrow. So that there's a lot of out of the box thinking that you can do, but I guess what I'll highlight is CRRSA wants to think out of the box with you, right? They want to help you through that and try to find those ways that you can use the EANS funding.
So I'm going to touch on, there's a whole bunch of questions coming in regarding curriculum, and I think I'm going to pivot to you, Rebecca. I think you had mentioned that you were able to utilize EANS for some curriculum issues. How did you do that?
Yeah, so we took a huge portion of our allocation and decided we were going to use it for what is long-term, what will last us past the 2023 date. That would be already, as Brian said, on our budget line, and curriculum is a huge cost. So we went to our vendors and we asked them, these are the books that we would like to, order up. And our vendors, great minds, and sent them literally a spreadsheet, and they came back with all the quotes and then submitted it through EANS and purchased through EANS. And so we used it both for, hard textbooks, and then we used it for online platform learning and assessment. So Star Renaissance, we use Illuminate, things like that, that we're already paying for, that we're an easy lift off. And really, literally, all you're transferring is the bill to. You still remain the owner of these things. I know that that's a problem with title funds, is that you no longer are able to own the subscription. The other problem with title funds is that they cannot integrate with school data. And that is just not the case with EANS. You can, bring on online programs that allow you to integrate with your own data. And so there's just different ways that we've used it in order to address curriculum and assessment.
And so am I right in saying that you'd probably be using category 12 for that, the learning loss? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Because let's see here, there's a number of other questions coming through. Before we pivot to those, though, I am going to circle back to you, Rebecca. So I feel compelled to address this. On our last email invitation, we had a tagline there to hopefully hook you in as listeners about paper. I found this so fascinating when we were having our meeting the other day, where you mentioned you were able to get paper of all basic commodities, that everyone on this call needs paper. How did you do that?
Yeah, I am frugal. So I literally was thinking, what are the things? And I was standing in the, workroom helping teachers put together packets for students who are remote learning and going through a ton of paper. And I was like, this is crazy. We're going through a ton of paper. EANS, can we use paper? And so our paper costs, we went back when we were able to do past reimbursements, we were able to get back pay on paper, and it literally was a $30,000 cost between our campuses. And so it seems like a little thing, but it's a big cost and it's rising. And then going forward, obviously, we're using either future reimbursement and then also direct purchase when we move forward this next year, just buy our paper for us. And so that's kind of where little ideas kind of drop from the sky during your day.
Excellent. And I just want to follow up to, Ken had asked, how do you justify textbooks under EAN? I think we said category 12 for addressing learning loss. And I think maybe he's wondering there, that's kind of you tend to think of that as this long-term investment. How does that work with ownership and all of that for textbooks? Rebecca, you want to take that?
Sure. So anything over, it's per item $5,000. So even though you've purchased $35,000 of books, if you divide that by the number of books, they're going by per item. Now, you do need to stamp all these. So you're going to have a stamping party, and they're able to inventory it by sets. So you don't need to put every title. I've been just using sets. So there's that right? Because inventory is a big piece of it. But yeah, that's kind of what we've been doing as far as, per item. We can keep it afterwards because it's, divided out.
Okay, good. And what about one of the questions out here? I don't know, do any of you have any experience with transportation? They're saying, can you use maybe category 11? If so, how? You couldn't buy a bus because that's obviously more than $5,000. So that would not work. But has anybody done anything with transportation?
I found out what was not eligible with transportation. So we currently don't offer any transportation to or from school for students, like school buses. Some home districts do choose to bus their kids. But we were saying, what if we added a bus that came from, city of Milwaukee, one that came from the northern suburbs or whatever. And essentially they said that because I was saying it's more spaced out than if they're carpooling in together, right? There's more room for social distancing in these vehicles if they're larger vehicles. And essentially because we did not pre-existing have that busing service, they did not approve that request for us. So reading between the lines on that, I think that if you already have a busing service that you offer for your students and you needed additional capacity for that, you probably could request that if part of the narrative is that, you know, it would allow for additional spacing of students.
Yeah, and I do know of a school that was successful in doing that earlier on. They wanted to provide more social distancing, spread the students out. They already were providing busing in the past, and they were able to get that approved. So that might be worth checking out. Let's see here, other questions coming in. Again, paper under which category? I think that was to support learning loss, right, Rebecca?
Correct.
So that category 12?
Yep.
Okay. All right, what about kind of some organizational things so that this whole process doesn't get overwhelming for you? You already have a million things to do, and some of the people on this call have to be the jack of all trades, kind of like Paul's situation. What kind of suggestions do you have to organize yourself, to get ideas from your staff, etc.?
I created a form, a Google form, in which I put pretty much every question that they ask on the EANS form when you're uploading. So what category, give me a justification for this, and then upload the quote or quotes. And it's been a really easy way to gather information from other teammates on things that we could be using it for, and then just organizing it. So it all comes down onto a spreadsheet that you're easily able to track, either color code. But that's kind of what I've been using in order to keep it all in one space in one area.
Lori, do you have anything to add on that? I know you're such an organizer.
Well, I actually didn't set up a spreadsheet for this, but I started separate folders in my EANS folders. So I would put, when I got a contract that I was submitting, I'd have those in one folder. Then when it was approved, I'd move them. And then when if it was direct service and they sent me when they ordered it, I'd move it, ordered. So I would know what stages everything was in. And then for the reimbursements, same thing. When I submitted a reimbursement request, I would actually print a PDF and file the emails that approved it. And then they'd send the PO and I'd file that because you need that for the reimbursement. And then when we purchased it and got the invoice, I'd file that away right away so that I'm ready at all stages to submit. So it was basically like a spreadsheet, but I didn't actually put it in the spreadsheet. But I kept all the pieces organized in folders so they were ready. And I would know what stage every item was in as far as acquiring it.
One of the things that came up in our prep meeting for this was to keep in mind that you might be the principal or head of a school. That doesn't mean you have to be the one in charge of doing all of this. Rebecca, could you speak to that?
Yes, I'm not a principal. I'm the director of student services. And how did I get this job? Because I oversee title funds and I work with title funds. And so, yes, I am not in the financial office either, but great communication between both of those obviously are important to this. But I think it's about finding someone who is able to learn and just go through the process. But yeah, you don't need to be, yeah, anybody really could do this.
Awesome. So I think there was one question that came through here that had to do with ARP EANS, which is different than we're talking right now, specifically about finishing out the CRRSA EANS, that first round of funding. But then we know that simultaneously now, the second round called ARP EANS is also kind of in the mix. And I know in the CRRSA seminar they had a week or so ago, they were highly encouraging schools to kind of finish out their allocation with the CRRSA EANS first before dipping into the ARP EANS allocation, just kind of keep things, I think, a little bit easier, less messy for everybody. But the big difference between the two being that there's no reimbursement piece with that ARP EANS. Is that correct?
Yes.
It's all direct services, right? So you have to work through the CRRSA.
So let's talk about that a little bit, because I do think that's maybe a little bit scary for some folks. They feel out of control when they have this, using this direct services mode. Brian, could you speak into that a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. When we first started using our EANS funding, I was very much inclined to go with future reimbursement just because there was more control over that. I wanted to, get a quote, pay for it, get reimbursed for it, very easy. And then over time, we started to think about what else we could do, what else we could get. And direct service has totally taken over sort of the way that we're using our EANS funding. I think for a few reasons, one being working with CRRSA 6 has been very, very helpful. And they've been great to work with, and hiring people through CRRSA 6 was something we were very skeptical of because, what about the salary? What about the hiring process? Are they going to pay benefits? I saw someone just asked a question about that. And CRRSA 6 does pay benefits, and are they comparable to what we have? And we took a look at that, and they were pretty good. So we've totally swung more towards direct service now, and especially kind of leading into the second round where that's the requirement. But it's been pretty easy to do direct service, and from a bookkeeping perspective, it's a lot easier too, because money doesn't have to come, out of your accounts and then go back into your accounts or anything like that. It just happens through CRRSA 6.
Excellent. Does anybody know the answer to the question, circling back to ARP EANS? Justin had asked, it doesn't look like textbooks and online supplements are allowed in ARP. Do you know anybody whether that's true or not?
Yeah, they're allowed.
They are, okay.
Everything, all the categories, everything that was allowed in CRRSA EANS is supposed to be allowed in ARP EANS. The only difference, as you said, is no reimbursements.
Okay.
Yeah, if you're trying to get your deep roots Christian education curriculum paid for out of it, that's not going to work, right? But pretty much any other type of curriculum or books that you want to buy, whether it's print or whether it's online, is eligible. The big category that we kind of haven't talked about yet is also any educational technology like services. So like subscriptions that you have, right? So our Securely subscription, our service to have the IT guys like maintain our firewall and run tests on our network integrity, that's all eligible, right? Screencastify, Pear Deck, Quizlet, I don't know, like all these things that teachers use in the classroom, right? They're all eligible to be paid for out of EANS.
Wow, that's amazing. One question that came in here says, where can they find their balance? I believe they just can contact CRRSA 6 for that, to find out the balance of where they're at. Okay. And then another question, does CRRSA 6 maintain a record of purchases that each school should have, could have access for themselves? Because I think this whole inventory thing and keeping track of this is hard. Someone want to speak to that?
You can't have access yourself, but if you request that list, the list that they'll send you that shows your balance and everything, it'll list out everything you've requested and everything that's been paid for. It shows it encumbered, and then it shows it what it's paid for, and then it shows it removing the encumbered. So it's a little lengthy, but you can easily figure out what's happening.
And I think when we had our meeting, Rebecca, I thought I heard you say that you actually just kind of cut and paste and utilize some of that for keeping your inventory. Could you speak to that?
Yep. So basically exactly what Lori said, you can request, we requested monthly an expenditure report. They'll send it directly. It's in an Excel sheet. And it is a great resource because, there's a lot of things flying around. So you want to make sure what they've got on your end is the same of what you've got on your end, obviously. And I used it to make sure that we are up to snuff on our, inventory list, which is a mile long. So it really helps you keep track closely.
Excellent, excellent. So one of the things too, I just wanted to reiterate is when we had our meeting, you were saying how just to think broadly and not limit yourself to thinking of health and safety, right? So when those programs first rolled out, I think everyone was of the mindset that it had to be masks and health related stuff. And hopefully with this phone call now today, you're realizing that, boy, there's a wide variety of things at your school that would still fit underneath these various categories. And I think we've said several times that if you're not sure which category, just call Jason at CRRSA 6 and they'll probably help you figure that out. What other kind of last comments here? We've got about 10 minutes left that we can use. Would our panel like to share with people as encouragement or creative ideas of things that you used your EANS funding for?
We
Well,
kind of
this
touched.
is one thing. I'm sorry. Okay, just one thing, being from a smaller school, it has a wonderfully supportive church. I just had to work with the church leadership too, to let them know we're going to be expending, $47,000 and that it wouldn't be reimbursed for a month or two. So just have to, just probably need to work with your church leadership too, if you're from a smaller, smaller school, religious school.
For if you're doing that reimbursement, but I would think that maybe would be one of the positives about doing the whole direct service thing, right, Brian? Because then you aren't needing to expend anything.
Correct. It eliminates that cash flow gap for you.
From the time that the COVID relief funds, all of them started being available, I took it on, and I didn't necessarily have to as the CFO, but I wanted to because I'm the one working on the budget. And I, like Brian, took the path of, I want to find things we know we're going to need to pay for in our budget and try to supplement our budget with them versus just buying things because we wanted to buy things. So there's a lot of communication going on with all the departments in our school. But I started out with the mindset that Brian did of wanting to get the reimbursements. And then over time, I was like, why? If I'm going to have it and pay for it in my budget, it's just an extra step. It's work, it's accounting steps. And I just started going for the direct expenses more, which is just easier. And then going back to the staffing and the budget, we are tracking some data on how we think the positions that we've added for specifically to support learning loss, whether they're helping move the mark on our students or not. Are they making a difference? Are they making enough of a difference in growth in these students to actually keep them on at the end of the budget period? Again, a decision that every school has to make for itself, but it's part of our budget decision. So I'm really actually happy and fortunate that I did take this on because it's helped me really stay on task with what we need to do in the future years as this money is phased out. So I again just recommend thinking of it from a budget perspective and what are you going to spend money on? And I've also learned over time to try to spend it. If we're spending money on many things, we're spending a lot of money every day. I've tried to steer away from the inventory items as well and go with the subscriptions, just everything to make it easier as time has moved on. So I would also recommend thinking about that. If you have choices, take the easy way out.
I think my sort of last thoughts on this are, at times, I think a lot of us have felt that these funding programs can be like a square peg in a round hole, right? That's sort of the experience that we've maybe had with ESSER, GEAR, things like that. But EANS has felt totally different to us. It feels more like the program is working for us versus us sort of working to figure out the program. So I would encourage schools to take a look at everything that you're paying for. Take a look at the last set of invoices that you paid for, and there's probably something in there that's EANS eligible, whether that's an IT vendor or your student information system or, you know, your monitoring software for Chromebooks, like there's stuff that's in there that EANS can cover. And CRRSA has done a great job of making it easy for us to do that. So that would be my encouragement to everyone.
So let's talk on that for just a moment. One of the questions came in, are subscriptions like Power School and Schoolology eligible? Bill is clarifying there that the SIS system itself would not be eligible, but LMS systems, which Bill, I don't know what that means.
Those are learning management
Yeah,
systems.
learning management. So like we have Blackbaud we're moving to Blackbaud as our provider, and there are 3 systems that we have: EMS, SIS, and LMS, right? So the enrollment management system is not eligible, right? The student information system is not eligible, but the learning management system, which is displacing Google Classroom for us, right? That is eligible. I have heard that getting the Google Suite paid for by EANS money is not a thing, I think. Is that true? Or did somebody share that in our other call, or did I hear that somewhere else? Maybe I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Again, one of the questions would be for these subscriptions, like where does that fit? Do you know off the top of your head what category that is?
Educational technology.
Okay, so it would still fall under that.
That's number
education.
9, I think is the right, I think that's the number.
Excellent. Last thoughts, Rebecca?
We were talking about transportation and social distancing. We've gotten some new cafeteria tables out of this, justifying it by increasing social distancing. So furniture, if you can justify it that way, furniture, student desks, cabinets to store learning materials, nursing materials, things like that.
Yeah, and I think if you're going to do that, just probably with the whole desks and things at the last CRRSA seminar they had, they're going to start being a little bit more careful about that, as they're wondering if you're going to do social distancing, why didn't you start doing that a year ago? And so some schools, a lot of schools actually have had a lot of success getting a wide variety of furniture. But if you're going to go that route, I would probably recommend doing it ASAP before they start kind of closing off that opportunity. But those are
you have to really tie it back to the social distancing thing, I think, right now, for the furniture to work. That was the gist I got from Jason on that last call, right? So if your enrollment doubled and you're just trying to buy new furniture to have like let's hear stuff, that's not going to work just by itself. But if you can explain that this is going to allow for better distancing in your classrooms, you may still have a shot at furniture. So
awesome. Well, I think that about covers it for us, and hopefully we answered some of your questions. Feel free to shoot me an email at scw@parentchoice.org if you'd like further follow-up with questions. Otherwise, I would just highly recommend reaching out directly to CRRSA 6. And again, their email is eans@crrsa6.org. And they are extremely responsive and really want to be helpful to you. So with that, I just want to thank you so much to each of the 5 school leaders who were willing to be our roundtable participants today. I think it was super helpful. SCW will be offering more seminars. We've already got one scheduled for March on a completely different topic. So you'll be hearing about that, the details of that soon. But otherwise, have a great day, y'all. Thank you for joining us.